Hi, my name is Carmela Hutchison, and I'm president of Disabled Women's Network of Canada, Réseau d'Action des Femmes Handicapées du Canada, and our head office is in Montreal, and we became involved in the FemNorthNet project in order to help women understand about disabilities and disability accommodation, and also to engage women in the wider participation in the issues facing them during the FemNorthNet project to ensure that women with disabilities become engaged and active in the affairs that affect them. And I noticed that there are many ramps in the communities I visited, and there are some accessible hotels and that sort of thing, but by and large, not a lot of organizations that help women with disabilities, and also difficulties around accessibility, which is nationwide with shelters. And Disabled Women's Network of Canada also consults to women's shelters who want to have a more accessible space. We did a study several years ago that also is very usable today, and doing the study itself, the research questionnaire, actually helps the women plan the space just by the questions that we ask. And the other is to engage and develop the capacity of disabled women to come out and take part in the efforts that are going on in the various northern communities, which is the Losh, Happy Valley, Goose Bay, and Thompson, Manitoba, in order to have a voice and a say in the issues that affect them. For example, in the mining towns during boom economies, rents go very high, and when people with disabilities are in fixed income, it really affects women, and it affects women who have children especially, because very often accessible units are designed for one person and not a mother who might have a child or two with a disability. So it's important to have spaces designed that people can live in and move about and participate in the community. But in the meantime, we need women's voices heard. So I'm really hoping that, some outreach will be able to receive some contact from women with disabilities in our areas and across the country. Well, I think that in terms of the style of leadership that I see in women in northern communities is that very often it's more intentional and things are thought about. There's a lot more collaboration and consultation that goes on before a community feels able to move forward. And I see a lot of that with the disability community as well. And I think also that there's a lack of sufficient funds sometimes to have sort of some of the things that we would like to have in our communities that are accessible. And the funding issue is the same as for my own house. I need a lift, and right now I'm having trouble. I've got the funding for the lift, but not the funding for the carpentry to get the lift installed. And I'm worried that I may lose the funding for the lift itself. So those are the kinds of issues that a town might face, because a town may also get funding for the machine, but not for the carpentry. Or they might get funding for the machine and the carpentry, but not the electrics. And so then those are the kinds of issues that they also face, and those are the same barriers. So whether it's just in a person's individual home, or in one case, the landlord would not allow the installation of grab bars. So those are issues that affect communities as well. If whole companies come in and buy up apartments and take up all the rental stock and then turn them condo, then again, that's another way that women with disabilities lose access to housing. And their incomes, of course, on disability are not sufficient to allow them the opportunities that might otherwise be there. And if employment spaces don't think about women with disabilities who would want meaningful opportunities for labor, may also have skills and contributions that they could contribute, and that's very important. And the other thing as well is that wherever women are, I had one person who said, if you can lick a postage stamp, you can be part of the disability movement. If you can just do this, That's a form of leadership. And sometimes an email, speaking as we are now, I'm speaking on a YouTube. Other people are putting out messages and things on YouTube or Skype or on listservs. There are lots of things that you can even do from bed. I've taken teleconferences in bed, and I actually have had some women on our national board who took teleconference from the hospital bed. Like, they just kept on, meeting those challenges. And one other woman actually did a news interview from her hospital.
Wow.
And even though it wasn't related to why she was in hospital, she still did the news interview. So there are many things that we can do. I think that it's important to just really believe in the fact that we've all heard the word no before. So we can deal with that, right? And also to believe that we can try. We can just try. There's all kinds of hope. And, when I first became disabled, I actually crawled around on my soft underbelly for probably about 5 or 6 years. And somebody in my community needed help. And I also have a mental disorder, which is dissociative identity disorder or multiple personality. And this person was a fellow multipla, and I could not help my sister. I could not help her. And when I say sister, I mean in the feminist sense. So I could not help her at all. And I sat down with my husband and I said, the human family absolutely has to have something better to offer. We have to. This is just terrible. And so I started to get involved in the mental health movement, and then I got involved in the wider disability movement as my own physical disabilities became more challenging. And then I got involved in the feminist disability movement because I had a friend who said to me, she phones me up and she says, Carmela, she said, I know, and she's a dear friend of mine, and her name actually, I'm just going to say, is Joanne Dumont. And Joanne is a dear friend who basically said to me, Carmela, you've got to do this. I know I gave you all kinds of grief last week because I said you should start reducing the boards and committees that you're on. And she said, but you've got to do this. And I said to her, but, why don't you do it? And she said, but I can't travel safely. And my heart broke, and I did it, right? So I had 3 calls that week, and she was the third. And Joanne and I lived 20 minutes down the road from each other, and she and I were, trying to get a support group going, and we're kind of getting into all sorts of obstacles where, the library couldn't do it, and hotels only for a small fee, of course, and this hall couldn't do it, and that hall couldn't do it. And I said, you know what, we may have to set this down for now, but I said there will be an office here. I don't know when, I don't know how, but we did indeed open an office through Alberta Network for Mental Health, where is another organization I'm president of, and we have some visionary brothers on that board who give us all kinds of support to the extent that feminism has come full circle. And so they actually formally wrote Dawn and asked about how can we learn about gender, how can we also learn what to have the organization that you guys have, but for men. And so neither the men or the women have been sure about how to deal with that. And part of it's a resource issue, right? Like in terms of funding. And also the concern that, men might be silenced if women are present, women might be silenced if men are present. So, what do we do about that? But at least the question has been asked.
I was wondering what you're...
And so that was also a real success, because for me it's like feminism has come full circle, right? And the other things in terms of leadership that were very exciting, that made a difference too, a substantive difference in the lives of disabled people. Probably I can point to 3 of them as being the most major. The very first one was the income support, the low income review in Alberta, which reviewed income support, and it was a struggle for so many years because at first they didn't even want to release their findings, and because they were contrary to what they expected. And then over time, they did release their findings and made all kinds of improvements. And February 10th this year was the announcement in the press that AISH was going to be raised $400 a month to $1,588. So, that is leadership to one of the best income replacement programs in the country. The other one was the establishment of the Mental Health Commission of Canada, because I was involved in the early days of its development through National Network for Mental Health. And I was president at the time when they decided to have a mental health commission. And I'm a lifetime member there, so it was a really nice thing to be there when that happened, because it is in Calgary as its head office, and very exciting to have seen that come to life. And the very last thing also happened on February 10th, because that was a red letter day, which in coalition with LEAF and also CCD intervened, and there were some other organizations from Ontario that intervened in the DAI case, which made it possible for sexual abuse survivors who have mental disability, and please, the term mental disability is a Section 15 charter term under the human rights, and that is why they chose to keep that language. But it allows anyone whose mental capacity might be challenged to give evidence the same way that any other witness has, without being subjected to all of the extra questioning that used to come with that. So that was one of the it's a landmark decision and a real win for feminism and for disabled women in this country. So those are the three.
And what a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your time and for some of those incredible stories and insights.